Hello all. Thank you for joining the Human Libraries of Procurement podcast. We call this Human Libraries of Procurement for three basic elements: the human connect, the libraries part, which shows knowledge and wisdom, and procurement because we talk about procurement. We have one such human libraries today, Arjen Van Berkum. Arjen, thank you for doing this. How are you doing today?
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here.
Arjen, we'll start with your career journey and then we'll take it from there.
I think, like most people, I never thought when I was in university I would end up in procurement or contract management. After university, I started classical in a traineeship with a large bank, and then you go from one department to the other, and you move to another bank, and then you move to an insurance company, all the time going up, having all kinds of leadership positions. And finally, you end up in the resource allocation function of a large organization, which deals with procurement, staffing, sourcing, internal competences, etc. And then when the credit crunch hit, I thought there's never a better moment than start your own company in a crisis. So I started my own company in a crisis, first in secondment, did some work in that. We sold that rather successfully, then moved on into the world of robotics and IT services. Did some things in there as well. Then finally in 2018, I decided to move back to one of the things I really love. 2010, I became a shareholder in that business and working in the field of contract management, and especially looking at, okay, there's a contract. Now, how are we going to execute in it? So although I truly believe that you definitely need good procurement to get to a contract that you can actually do. They
Right.
are symbiotic. The one cannot exist without the other, and both serve a business need. And that's been my career journey ever since. So partly being working for large corps and running thousands of people, and also now in something totally different and being much more of an opinion maker and helping organizations to get to the next level in this. So quite a long journey, spans over 30 years. Back at it, I'm very happy with all the experience and possibilities I was given, and especially also all the senior people that ever had and took time to learn me stuff, because I think that's one of the things that one also needs to do in your career. That's why I like your podcast so much, is actually giving back. And knowledge hoarded is knowledge that's worth nothing.
Right.
So it's about sharing. And that's what we're going to do today, I think.
Right. Arjun, thank you. That's a great thought. Giving back to the community and a lot of good experience there. Well done. I wanted to give a disclaimer, although it is not very relevant in Arjun's case. We are not representing any company here. We are on our own capacity. It is only logical that some names might come out. We are not representing any company as such. When I was looking at your profile, I see that you are a guest lecturer at IIM Ahmedabad and TU Delft. IIM Ahmedabad is a big deal. What are the topics that you tell the students about?
Yeah, actually, I'm also engaged in Rotterdam and in Berlin.
Hmm.
I am invited because students really want to talk with somebody that's actually in the business, that's doing something with this kind of knowledge. I talk about a few things: how difficult it is for small organizations with highly innovative ideas to actually get them to scale with large corporations, which is something else than finding the client, but it's actually how to bring it to the next level, because then they enter the procurement space. And then from a selling perspective, they need to work with that. So that's one part. The other part is how the human component functions in this, because if you
Right.
look at the field of procurement and contract management, there's a freaking amount of menial tasks that can be automated using either agentic agents or even baseline AI or large language. But at the end of the day, it will present you information and you need to do something with this information. And now, how to
Right.
find the right wisdom to actually make that intelligence tangible. Data leads to insights, leads to wisdom, leads to knowledge in the end. You need to really understand how to capture the human element in this. And lastly, I usually talk about the effects of managing a larger ecosystem. So when you look at every organization, it's freaking impossible to do everything yourself, which means that you buy stuff. Sometimes you even sell stuff, but if you're in a government, of course, you don't sell stuff. But they're all intertwined, they're all connected. You
Hmm.
usually have suppliers, multiple suppliers. How do they work together? What's your strategy around that? What do you want from that? How do they interface? At the base level of any orchestration in an ecosystem is actually what did you agree on?
Right.
And the what did you agree on should be tied to one very important strategic element. What do you want to achieve? So I try to explain the difference between buying something and achieving something, because buying something is easy. Getting to understand what you want to achieve and what actually drives that is much more difficult, but also much more relevant. Then you need to align that with the corporate strategy. And the corporate strategy usually has two big building blocks. One is about what you need to do from a rules and regulation perspective. I usually call that the non-sexy part of organizations. It's usually where the accountants are really happy. Like,
Right.
and on the other part, there's your mission and your vision, what you want to achieve. And those two, one is actually your license to operate, and the other one is what do you want to achieve between that license to operate. And you need to bring these two together. That means that you need to show people how it works. You need to understand the mechanisms behind it. So that's what I teach about. And that usually boils down to examples coming from SMEs working with large corporates, because that's where you usually see at first hand how corporate legal practices and startups and entrepreneurship usually don't really match up. They both need to have a certain kind of flexibility, because in today's business, I think everybody that watches the news realizes it's not about static documents anymore. Contracts are a living element that need to change all the time because the nature of business changes. Actually, at the end, talk about it's about understanding why you need the mindset, but then understanding what that mindset needs to be. And that's embrace uncertainty, make sure that everything you agree on is based on objective. The third thing is understand that although you can automate anything and everything, it doesn't mean that you don't need humans. You need to make sure that
Right.
you let the humans do the right things.
Right. This is the place to start. You have the brightest minds, and this is where I think procurement fails. We haven't been able to go to the brightest mind and tell them that this is a career as well. Good thing to do what you are doing.
My problem with most classical MBAs is they spend out of a 40-day program, it's about 20 days about corporate finance, discount cash flows, and all those kind of
Right.
things. Then there is 5 days marketing and 3 days on HR, and then the remaining 2 days are actually in stuff like procurement, contract management, supply chain management, etc. And it has to do with the fact that most leaders, especially in the corporate environment, have totally lost ground and footing in the operations. They're no longer in the trenches. They
Right.
don't want to make their hands dirty, they want to be the general in the background.
Yeah.
Well, in today's business, it's impossible to manage a highly fluid front just from the back end. You need to be involved in day-to-day operations, understanding what it's about, ask the right questions without going into micromanagement. That a lot of procurement folks, because procurement folks that don't understand the business, yeah, it's highly logical that then the business doesn't give you a seat at the table.
Right.
I mean, if you go on LinkedIn, there's hundreds of articles saying we deserve a seat at the table.
Yeah.
The only way to get to a seat at the table is by actually giving value and by
Right.
actually helping the business and making sure that you fix their problem. And one thing, procurement is not the compliance police. So if
Yeah.
the business says we want something, then the procurement answer should not be you're not allowed to do that. The
Right.
procurement question should be, how can I help you best?
Yeah.
And what you tend to see that in a lot of organizations, procurement is filled with a lot of actually very smart but highly frustrated people that are usually engaged too late.
Yeah.
In fact, don't get the way collaboration is, and that requires not only the business to reinvent itself, but that means that also the support functions to the business, procurement, finance, HR, all those kind of functions need to reinvent themselves. And that reinventing in the procurement arena is relatively slow.
Yeah.
Too many dinosaurs in the function.
Right.
Yeah, you meet these people that say, "Yeah, I've been in procurement my entire working career," and then I have something like, "Okay, that's not what should happen." Procurement people should be elsewhere in the business as well, work in the
Right.
primary process, be engaged with clients, maybe even do a stint in sales to really be a more complete person. Being procurement all your life, if there's ever one thing I would like procurement people to do is be as diverse in your career experience as you can be. You'll end up like most of these senior procurement people in a place usually positioned under the CFO, where you're only being asked with the question, can we save some money?
Right.
Well, let's be honest, that's not procurement, that's cost reduction.
Right. I get a lot of good thoughts here. One is the seat at the table. We'll get to that. One that I picked up was this thought that your experience, the more you learn, the better it is, and carry forward the procurement experience also to the roles that you are doing next, let's say. But I wanted to still go on with your career journey. You could have been anything else, more mainstream or something. What excited you about, let's say, procurement or specifically contract management?
I am one of those individuals that really love operations.
Okay.
I liked being in COO kind of roles or in the COO kind of function. And that has to do with the fact that I am a people person.
Hmm.
So operations is a lot about people. I'm also a process person in the sense that I usually hate processes, but I understand that it's vital to have them.
Right.
But they should not be there as a Bible. They should be there as a means to achieving something.
Hmm.
Actually, if you talk about contract management, you're talking about doing and realizing stuff. Making a deal, I've done that, is cool,
Right.
both on the sales side and on the buying side. But then usually that's not where the value is created. And the value is created post-signature.
Right.
And being in operations, loving value, loving execution, making sure that things actually work, you need to be in the space where it actually happens. And that's usually in the delivery is there are two sentences I hear a lot, which actually are for me a proof that something is really wrong. The first sentence is, hey, what these guys from procurement bought is what we actually don't need.
Right.
And the other one is the one, what these guys in sales sold, we actually cannot make.
Right.
The things I find really interesting is, for instance, a requirement management process.
Yes.
Who owns it? Who actually says, this is what we really need? This is what we really want to achieve? And what you tend to see is that a lot of procurement people, because business is slow to respond, doesn't really know what they want, start thinking for themselves and therefore both manage the process from
Mhm.
getting it acquired, but also get involved in the actual details of the requirements. And for me, in order to get things working, the right people should have the right accountability. If you take it a step further, one of the key things I've always find amazing in the procurement function is that actually procurement claims to own category management.
Right.
Now,
Right.
if there's ever one procurement function that should be owned by the business, it's category management, but then on the level, where do we want this category to go to?
Yeah.
What does it need to perform? That's a business question. The now how to do it with the market, who's going to do it in the market, which suppliers might be doing this. The business, because they move around way too much, they get promoted, they go work somebody else. That really sticking to getting to a strategy and then fixing it and then taking the ownership is very important. And the biggest mistake most procurement people make is take ownership of things they're not the owner of, but
Right.
therefore also become the holder of the problem they're actually not the problem owner
I
of.
think the biggest two problems are procurement is either not involved at the right time. And the second one is that the scope gathering that you said, we really don't know who owns it. So whoever has the time just gets involved and tells you the requirement as much as they want to tell you. How do you see that we can better this situation?
There are several things. Procurement is to be as close to the business as possible.
Right,
So to give you an example, one of the best procurement departments I know, it's in high-end manufacturing organization. They specifically want their procurement people to house in the factory buildings. They
right,
don't want them in head office. The second thing is have a service attitude,
right.
which means that's a can-do attitude and it's never you're not allowed, this is not smart, etc. The third thing procurement people need to do is actually involve themselves into resource management planning. Start with managing your own resources. The amount of procurement organizations I meet that have like 20 to 30% external procurement capacity, usually because they were completely lousy in their planning and then their own people are completely tied up and they need external capacity. If you do your contract management correctly, you know which contracts are end of life cycle. You
Yes,
know which are the ones that are going to be renegotiated, which are the ones that are going to be tendered again. You can plan that 10 to 16 months ahead. Another thing, you need to take on the role of project management. Hey,
yes,
every sourcing process is a project.
right, yes,
That means that you need to take that role and you need to say, I'm here to manage the process and to get you to the best outcome as possible. But that means that you, dear business, need to give me the business requirements. You, dear contract management department, need to give me the contract management requirements. Legal, you need to give me the templates. And then it becomes kind of like a traffic light. What do you have? What do you don't? And then you can ask the right question. Okay, if compliance says that this is the rules of the game, can we get a signature from somebody high up in the compliance department that says yes? So you're going to manage that as a logistical train. And if you then start moving and acting as a project manager, you can actually say to the business, I don't need to understand what you actually want to buy or what you want to achieve. I'm here to make sure that you have a process that ends up with the result being a contract that is tick in the box of all the support and staff departments. It's tick in the box of all the legal and compliance stuff. Might not always be price.
right,
And for instance, asking the question, what's more important? I usually ask questions like, what's more important, price or business continuity?
yes,
Then the business will understand that they are in the driving seat of getting what they want. And of course, in the first contracts, they probably already know with which supplier they want to do it. And some businesses will listen to you, some they don't. That's not your problem.
yeah,
And what I see is one of the key elements that procurement people and contract management people as a competency have is that they're so freakingly engaged with the well-being of the company that
right,
they feel this ownership here in their heart,
yeah,
and therefore they are taking ownership they don't have.
right,
Stay away from ownership that's not yours.
right. BCP part, the continuity part, as compared to cost savings, I think COVID was the biggest example where the BCP happened, and it became more important than what you saved that year. So that's a great point there.
What's
Yeah,
currently happening in the USA
yeah,
is going to lead to a massive reshuffle in strategic alignment, sourcing
right,
discussions, will lead to massive changes in the coming years maybe, but I already see in the market a lot of how can we get rid of technology that we don't control. COVID was a lesson.
mhm,
But that was a lesson more in the supply chain in general. What we're now going to see is because of what's happening in a global space, we are going to rethink the use of technology and technology ownership on a very large scale. We all accepted that we have a desktop made by a certain company
right,
and using text programs used by a certain company. Well, I now see a lot of open source initiatives really taking a kick back up again to get out of these kind of technology lock-ins. What we thought was ERP and ERP systems, yeah, is now going to change.
Yeah.
And that means there's going to be a lot of resourcing, renegotiation in contracts. We might even see certain technology giants being forced to split into multiple parts. I think we're going to see a lot of action in the procurement arena the coming year. But if you don't engage with that discussion now with the business, you're going to again be confronted with the fact that the business is already on a path and that you cannot steer it anymore, or at least give real value. Because business executives are now really thinking on strategic autonomy, supply chain dependencies from certain markets, certain countries.
I also like the thought that you said, right? That don't take things that are not your ownership. I mean, don't take everything. Everything is not your problem. Most often, because procurement is not allowed to do its core job, so it does the other things to make itself relevant. That category management is something that is primarily business. That is where it should originate. And procurement can be a part of it, which is good. You can have expertise or knowledge and all that. And you can be a part of it. As a service provider, that should be a good key takeaway.
Nice, nice.
Talking about the seat at the leadership, I understand why procurement needs it. It's a prestige kind of thing. It's a position kind of thing. It's also a hyped up thing, right? I mean, does procurement actually need a seat at the table, or should be the actual approach?
Maybe I should begin by going back to the early parts of my career. When I reached certain leadership level, always been wearing suits and ties, etc. But in the beginning of the year 2002, I got appointed somewhere, and I thought I have a department. It was a big, large operations department with over 3,000 people, and these were like really worker bees in
Hmm.
an insurance company. Okay, these people come to the office, they wear jeans, they wear sneakers. Um, why should I be the one in a suit?
Right.
So I have decided to kick out suits. I also now never go into a suit to a client.
Right.
For one, of course, people accept it, and once you reach a certain level, you don't need to adhere to the corporate code.
Hmm.
But for me, status has never been a thing.
Right.
Having an office myself, I really hated it. Having a room on your own. And I think that if you are interested and find status in life relevant, don't work for procurement.
Right.
If you find status irrelevant but want to do the right things, which is
Yeah.
something better than doing something right,
Right.
so doing the right things, then it's not about status and power and those kind of things. Leaders that need status and power for their self-esteem are lousy leaders.
Right.
And when I talk to leadership teams, and I do that quite a lot as a speaker or as a teacher, I always tell them, um, you need to be understanding what your role is.
Right.
And your role is not status. But I understand that in average corporate life, most managers are not leaders. And most managers are usually thinking the minute they get promoted on what their next promotion is going to be and what they need to show to make the next promotion. I never promote people because I like them. I promote people in places because I know they can do the job, even if I think it's somebody I would never invite to a birthday party. For
Right.
me, liking somebody is in the business environment irrelevant.
Right.
So actually, I have hired people that I thought, okay, this is somebody I'm never going to be able to be friends with.
Hmm.
But I know two things. One, they're trustworthy, and B, they will work hard to get to the objectives. And people that only want to make these kind of promotions based on status, they're not going to get there. It's the people that at these large town hall meetings, they're always the same people that raise their hands and
Yeah.
have a question. And it usually starts with a slimy sentence like, I really liked your presentation and I have a question,
Right.
because they want to be seen. One of the biggest benefits of having AI is that everything becomes transparent.
Right.
So in the past, a lot of leadership promotions were based on how well somebody could sell it.
Hmm.
But if you have good AI and good performance management, which is neutral, it's no longer about being nice, it's about delivering value.
Right.
And procurement people that say, we need a seat at the table, we need to be in the boardroom, should really think about themselves if they are really, really relevant.
Right.
I see happening is organizations that say, I have a chief customer officer, I have a chief financial officer, and usually I have a chief supply.
Hmm.
So you have the entire value chain, as in selling stuff, making stuff is the COO, and buying stuff. Those
Right.
are the three core elements every organization does. Underlying is finance and all the staff departments. And on top of it is the chief executive. If you start thinking in that way,
Right.
you're the one responsible for buying stuff and making sure it's being delivered, etc. But that's no longer procurement. That's managing the entire downstream side of the supply chain.
Right.
So based on that, you have three distinct buckets, and you really need to align them across the value chain. Because if you don't buy the right stuff, you can also not sell the right stuff. You cannot make it. But if you cannot make it, you cannot buy it, you cannot sell it. So it's all
Yeah.
dependent on each other. That's what I see currently happening in organizations, that they're much more thinking about structuring their organizations based on the value chain. The procurement, as per se, will not only be seen as creating the contracts, but will also be responsible for the delivery on the contracts, which is something completely different than what is nowadays. And I do see organizations moving that way. Um, but within every cycle of organizational structure, there will be a new thing in 3 years
We'll
again.
start with very basics of contract management. Let's talk about how is contract management important for procurement?
For me, having good contract management will give procurement fantastic information what to do better next time.
Hmm.
And so you will know where the issues were, what needed to be changed, what didn't, what went well, didn't go well. And that's feedback for the next sourcing cycle.
Right.
And that means that the best way to find what to improve and where to improve is to have a look at how did it go the last time. And not just the sourcing process, but how did it go into the execution. And actually, if you look at the contract life cycle, it has just two steps. One is creating a contract, and the other is execution on the contract.
Right.
And there are different phases below that. But if you go from contract execution back to contract creation, that
Right.
means there's a handover. And that means doing that well will make sure that the procurement process goes better. And the same goes on the handover from procurement to contract management. So often I see, here's the contract, let's start managing it. Okay, but what did we talk about? Were the real discussion points? Where did we fight over? Where did we give in, where we didn't want to give in but had to give in?
Right.
All these elements need to be there. There's more than just handing over the contract. And at the same time, when sourcing again, there's more than just saying, yeah, it went reasonably well. Ever revolving circle between procurement and contract management. Buying it, executing, becomes buying again, becomes executing again, and we go round and round and round. Now, what you tend to see is that in a lot of organizations, they actually don't work that well together. Because if contract management is part of the procurement function, then really the business sees it as an administrative something that they really don't need. And if it's part of the business and not of a procurement, usually the feedback loop back to procurement is lousy.
Right.
And the best way to structure it is to actually have good process ownership on the process having a contract, which means there's process ownership on creating it, process ownership on executing on it. So it's not about an hierarchical function, it's about process ownership function. And that's one of the key things that I like about the agile movement, because of the product focus and the process focus with product owners and process owners. Actually, you can break the silo thinking where everybody says, this is my job. It's
Right.
irrelevant. You need to bring a result. And the result is never an optimized part in a silo. It's an optimized process. The vision that you're both working to achieve in a process a superior result. And then the discussion about should it be part of contract management, be part of procurement or the business, or should procurement be under finance or in the business, becomes irrelevant because it's process focus.
Right. Also gets me to that question that contract management is often ignored. We talk about source to contract. Once you execute a contract, you have the signature copy. Most of the time I have seen is that the signature copy never gets into the CLM or the tool that you have. It is lying there on the desk, gathering dust. So do you see any reason as to why it is like this? Contract management, which is such an important step, is ignored most of
Yeah,
the
but there is a significant difference. If you look at the sales side,
Mhm.
contract management is usually a core function
Right.
because the selling organizations usually sell their primary process to a client
Hmm.
and they manage it based on the contract.
Right.
So that means that on the sales side, contract management is a very mature function.
Yes.
And they usually get paid extremely well. Almost half of our clients is sales organizations. And I can say to you that, for instance, in the Dutch market, the salary difference is close to 80% between the two.
Wow.
Contract management in buying organizations is significantly less than in sales organizations. But remember that in sales organizations, they also have targets like renewal rates, upsell, and those kind of things. So they're way more commercial and way more executing on the deal. But let's focus on the buying part. Usually the stuff you buy is not your primary process,
Right.
something you need to do to fix your primary process. Therefore, it usually means that it's not in the core competence field. And what you do see is that contract management in verticals that are highly business mature, like IT, is way more developed than, for instance, in HR. It has to do with it. IT has become a primary function, and HR, in its sense, is a very primary function, but there are headhunters enough out there, but there's only one Microsoft. You tend to see is that it's not just business orientation in sales versus procurement side. It also has to do that if you look at the procurement side in which the function is. And for instance, facility management is relatively mature in its contract management, but that's because it's a dissatisfier business and it's only about making sure that you get it done for as cheap as possible. Because tomorrow I can get another cleaning service, to be honest. The second part of the answer has to do, and I'm revolving back to earlier in this conversation, about making your hands dirty. One of my customers recently said, well, let's be honest, most organizations blindly say when a supplier says, I have an indexation proposal, they usually say, oh, yeah, that's okay, because they don't want the hassle. But it's about a lot of money. Or when there's a performance issue, yeah, well, let's tell them that, but I don't want you to go too strong in them because we need the relation. Let's be honest, yes, of course you need a relation. As I said earlier also, in the business, the art of being nice is important, but it's more important to be honest and to tell what's really happening about the penalties and drawing the card and saying you need to pay me something. That's an irrelevant something. But it's about, hey, you didn't deliver. How are you going to fix it? Why did it happen? How can we make sure it doesn't happen again? And what are you going to give me to compensate? Which is a totally different conversation, but it requires to go in depth into the material, into the contract, go into the trenches.
Right.
And most people don't like to be in the trenches. And the third part of the answer is there are actually people that say we invented writing to make agreements.
Right.
And the first written document that was
Yes.
ever found was a contract.
Right.
We've been doing it always, but usually we've been doing it really hidden. People in the
Right.
business doing it, not making it a specialist function. And what we see nowadays is that it's becoming clear that this is not a function you can just do. This is a function that you must execute, and it requires a certain amount of professionalism. Also, a function that's usually not really working well if you put people as a starting job in that function,
Right. Yes.
because they need to talk to senior stakeholders, to suppliers, and they need to understand the political games, the power machinations, etc. So it means that you need to have people that are able to work in the context of an agreement to actually make sure that change can happen.
Yeah.
And that's something business is now starting to see as a core added value,
Right.
because that is what the new normal is. The new normal is not, we're going to do this for the next 10 years. Impossible. And that
Yeah.
means that both buying and managing, so creating the contract and executing on the contract, requires a maturity step. And the biggest maturity step needs to be taken on the buying side, because the sales side has been doing this for a very long time.
Yeah.
I worked for this large financial institution, and we had one supplier manager for a very large IT provider. That
Mhm.
IT provider had 20 salespeople working all over our place.
Wow.
And that's usually also what you see happening. So I didn't say this in the introduction, but I'm a mathematician and I like to play chess.
Nice.
Procurement people, as chess players, always play with the black pieces.
Right.
And
Yes.
that usually means that the white pieces are the ones to move first. And they call that in chess terms the advantage of speed, doing
Right.
the first move. Sales always plays with white. At the buying side, always plays with black. That
Right.
means you have less people, usually less well educated. You have an information position that's usually worse than the suppliers because they know more than you do.
Right.
And still, you need to manage the process and get on top of it.
Yeah.
That's maybe the hardest soft skill of them all for the procurement function.
Right.
You always are one step behind. A procurement person doesn't go out to dinner with the chairman of your board, but usually
Right.
salespeople do.
Yeah.
They know more.
And what you said is correct, because I work for a large company where we were buying a lot of IT services, and there was a sales guy was there, just responsible for the contracts. You know, the you can never expect that from procurement or any other department in that sense,
So don't be that.
right? But continuing with contracts, the pre-signature steps that are there in contract, which is drafting of contract, sending it over, red lines, you negotiate, you get it agreement, you get a signature, and you're done. Most of us know about that, and we can improve that steps and all that. But I wanted to talk about the post-signature, the steps that are after the contract is signed. What should be ideally the post-signature contract steps?
My colleague Linda has written a book about that, which
Okay.
is sold over 100,000 times, which completely specifies the process, what needs to be done, the roles, the responsibilities, the tasks, etc. It's called CAT-CM, from contracts that actually work.
Hmm.
It can be found on Amazon and on all kinds of other sites. So if you think about the process level, there's three steps that happen post-signature.
Okay.
That's implementing the contract.
Right.
So that's everything you do from signing to the first delivery. There's executing the contract. So everything you do in the delivery phase. And once the final delivery is done, you need to close out.
Okay.
Then you already have sourced, of course, a new partner, but then you need to offboard the contract, etc. The second thing is what we always talk about is there's actually four distinct areas that in contract management you need to think about. And we call them pillars. And the first one is about make a division between what we call work to be done, which is
Mhm.
actually what needs to be delivered, which is owned by the business, and what we call all other contract matter that has to do with legal stuff, like IP, change processes, but also what you need to do when work to be done is not delivered as agreed. Second part of the first pillar. So the division between business and contract management. Then the second pillar is about all the other roles you have, from an authorized signatory to a contract owner, but also what we call realization and verification management. Actually, what does service management and project management do with a contract? That's the second pillar. The third one is actually about the 10 elements that a contract manager needs to manage: risk, finance,
Right.
obligations. In total, there's 10. And then the fourth pillar is about, okay, how do we then manage the process, which is based on the plan, do, check, act cycle, and create scenarios to make sure that we give the right attention to the right contracts.
Right.
And to give you an example, when I worked at this large financial institution, we had 2,500 temporary staff every day on our premises in our customer care centers. So we were the biggest client of all these temp agencies out here in the Netherlands. We also had somebody somewhere in the basement with a small team and a small contract, like 5 million a year, that were responsible to keep our payment infrastructure running 24/7.
Right.
Now we're a bank.
Hmm.
Yes, picking up the phone is very important.
Right.
But one thing I don't want is that the day before Christmas, all the ATM machines don't work.
Right. Yes.
Which means for us, contract management and supplier management on that specific supplier in the IT department was way more vital than these big temp agencies where we spend billions of euros. And see, you have these four elements. Two are about roles, two about what a contract manager should do, gives you a process, gives you an outline, gives you scenarios on how to manage the contract, and implement it as a best practice. We have approximately 5,000 organizations using this methodology to manage their post-award, half of
Hmm.
them in sales, half of them in the buying side. And it's kind of like agile. Everybody does agile,
Hmm.
but nobody does agile in the same way. So
Right.
we've created a methodology. And then we say to people, there's best practice. And best practice you don't create by sitting in an ivory tower and writing down something. Best practice you create to be out there, talk with the business, see what's happening, see what doesn't work, what will work, what actually people are doing, how to make their life easier. And that's why we see that post-award is really gaining traction, because nowadays accountants are asking questions like, how do you manage your business continuity if you have so many suppliers? Yeah, that's a question that's not being asked to procurement. That's a question that's being asked to the CEO. And they start thinking about, I need to do something post-award as well.
Yeah.
Or there's regulators that say, hey, it's fine that you outsource a large part of your IT, but it means that you have sensitive client data in systems of external IT providers. Please show us how you manage that sensitivity.
Right.
And then I see CIOs, and then they're starting to look at the ceiling with the shit, I don't know. But that's what portfolio management over contracts actually mean. This is not a process that will make you a winner, but it will make you a loser if you don't have it. There's nobody at a party that will say, I went to another bank because they have such a wonderful looking credit card.
Right.
They will go to another bank when they say this credit card doesn't work.
Yes.
So contract management, and in that sense, procurement the same. We are in dissatisfier business.
Yeah.
If it works, nobody cares. And if it doesn't work,
Right.
they're pissed. So you will never get a 10 for internal customer satisfaction as procurement or contract management, because you're doing something that they think, yeah, I could have done that myself as well.
Right.
And contract management is something that, like the procurement process, needs to be structured. It has distinct phases in the procurement process. There's the requirements gathering, there's the market consultation, there's all kinds of steps that need to be taken. And if you run it like a process, step by step by step, and every step is a stage gate, and the stage gate needs to be approved to go to the next stage, because the owner of what's need to be bought, of the owner of what's actually is bought, says yes,
Right.
then accountability in the business starts happening.
A lot of times we don't give the due importance to risk management. A lot of contract management is about risk management and risk mitigation. How much, you know,
Exactly. And,
uh,
and that means that also in the creation of a contract,
mhm.
these risk strategies must be part um, of the drafting. Who owns the risk? What's the premium of this risk?
Right.
Because sometimes when you say to a company, I want you to absorb this risk and pay the damage if there's something happens, actually it might be smarter to take the risk on your own and have a good backup.
Right.
But these are very difficult topics which are rarely discussed. Yeah, I want to transfer risk. Okay. but are you aware what the premium is for the risk transference?
Right.
It's kind of like an insurance. The price for insuring this versus the price of the effect might not be the best. For instance, you have a lot of people that buy a funeral insurance that costs like 100 euros per month. That's 1,200 euros per year. And when you die, they pay 10,000 euros. And then you have that insurance for 50 years. You
Right.
know?
Right.
And that's where next level procurement and contract management will move. It's not just about risk, but also about the price of risk mitigation or the price of doing risk yourself. And what you tend to see is that most people, because they don't want risk, they want to outsource everything. But what I always say to people, you can outsource everything except the A for accountability.
Right.
And that means that you can put a heavy fine on your supplier if they don't deliver, but it's not them that are going to be at the front page. It's you that's going to be at the front page. And it's still your reputational damage is there.
Yep.
And reputation is the one key element I see that's often overlooked, but it's probably the most important thing
Right.
out there when you start buying stuff. How do I protect my reputation? And that's not by saying, hey, you're responsible, fix it. That's by making sure that you have the right controls in place.
Right.
And getting these right controls should be a key element of every sourcing
Mm.
process.
Yeah. And that is I think the basics of buying. When I was starting, this was the one that was told to me that you have to protect the buyer's reputation first and
Yes.
then go about anything else.
No, but let's also be honest, up and until the COVID crisis, even the
Yeah.
credit crunch, it didn't hit us that hard.
Right.
The COVID crisis did hit us hard, but what's
Yeah.
happening right now is beyond.
Right.
So what we're going to see, and we already see it happening for, I think, 2 or 3 years, is that the realization of dependency has changed. It went from we can buy anything to actually realizing that you can buy a lot, but you cannot get it all.
Right.
And that realization will get the best procurement teams a seat at the table, but that's not because they're about let's get it as cheap as possible for you. No, it's about how are we going to protect the reputation? How are we
Um,
going to
Now that we have established that contract management is important, and why do you need it? You need a tool to do it in that way. What do you think when you are looking at the CLM tool? What are the key factors that somebody should look at?
There are three things you want to achieve when you go into CLM.
Hmm.
One is you need a repository, just a
Right.
place to store everything. The second thing is you need a system of record
Hmm.
where you actually can store everything that was done, all the ISO reports, whatever you need to store, all the meeting minutes, etc., etc. And the third one is a system of action that
Right.
will tell you when you need to do something. You can do a lot with CLM and a lot with agentic AI if you have these three in place. However, if you start thinking on CLM and you have not fixed your process within your organization, you get the classical paradigm, and that is if you automate a shitty process, you get shitty automation.
Right.
Redesign your process, make sure that everybody talks the same language. A typical example, if you interview 100 people within any organization and you ask them three things: what's the definition of a contract? What's the definition of contract management? And what's the definition of procurement? If on any of these three you get more than 40 different answers, don't
Okay.
buy, fix your process first.
Yeah.
Uniform language is vital. I meet so many CLM implementations that go wrong because then the consultant asks questions like, yeah, what do you want to track and what do you want to change? And then the answer is, and then it ends.
Right.
And also make sure that it's not procurement buying it because then people are not using it in the business. Make sure that the business wants it. And I
Yes.
know a lot of these systems really well, and their technology is in most of them is freaking amazing, one better than the other, etc. But the biggest problem in all the implementations is not the technology, it's the target organization.
Right.
Yes.
One of the things that are said about contract management is that a good contract management is a good supplier relationship. So your view on
Um,
that,
I
and
think that it's very important when you talk about supplier relationship management that actually, from an organizational perspective, you need to understand which suppliers deliver core critical capabilities to you.
right.
And those are the suppliers that might need different attention than just a
Yes.
contract management. They might also have supplier relation management attention or sometimes even executive involved attention. So that's the first thing to think about. It's also about time horizons. And so if I look at our business today, any business, the business continuity is executing on the current contracts. That's
Right.
contract management. If you look at tomorrow, then you really need to understand which part of the suppliers are actually there and able to manage future continuity of business, with the idea that it doesn't change. So if I buy, for instance, tables, and in the future I need tables, I need to be aware that in the future they will be able to deliver tables. Where real supplier management is what is the future of tables?
Right.
So it will be about innovation and change, and then how do these suppliers fit into our category strategy? But if you put it into the stream, like the business of today is the contract, the business of tomorrow is the relationship with the supplier, and the innovation is the relationship with the suppliers for the future, then you can put it into a perspective that actually works. Supplier relation management is about two types of suppliers. It's those you have, and it's those that you might need in the future.
Right.
Contract managers will not be involved in what are the suppliers we might need in the future. And what I see is that a lot of organizations spend way too much time with people going to conferences, etc., to talk with all kinds of suppliers that are not currently a supplier but a potential supplier.
Yes.
But to be honest, if I gave that example of tables, if I have a 7-year contract with a partner to deliver tables to me, why should I in the first year go to a conference about tables?
Right.
Supplier relationship management people are not the cheapest, that are actually involved in internal account management to get the suppliers to perform. To be honest, that should be in the contract with the supplier of today, so they don't need to be there. But they do need to talk about the long-term business needs and the long-term developments in the market, which means that supplier relationship management should be heavily connected to the business and to the category, the strategy of the category and the organization, and then drive value from that. In most organizations, there's contract administration, there's contract management, then you get procurement, then you get supplier relation management, then you get category management.
Yeah.
So it means that if you want to make a procurement career, get to category management as quickly as possible,
Right.
which is actually very stupid
Yeah.
because where is the most money?
Right.
The most money is created in the middle part by either buying the correct stuff for the right price and the delivery.
Right.
Supplier relations are for just a very few organizations relevant. I work a lot for a budget air carrier, and they really look at their supplier base and they know exactly which supplier adds what value in their customer journey. But they also know which 5 suppliers are mission critical for their customer journey, and they should perform maximum as possible. And you know how this budget business works. Those are the 5 suppliers. They never have to talk about can it be cheaper.
Right.
They have to talk about how can we innovate the process, operational cost lower, which is a totally different beast than I want a discount. That's actually one of the main reason I don't want any procurement organization to be part of finance, because finance looks at cash out.
Right.
They don't look at what's actually done for the cash.
Yes.
So if you want it cheaper, I can get anything cheaper. I'll just
Right.
go into service deterioration
Yeah.
because that's what usually happens. And then it means that as procurement needs to execute these kind of things, that the business starts hating procurement even more
Right.
because the business is the victim of service deterioration. And the CFO screams, I had a cost reduction.
Procurement sells savings the most. Whenever we are asked about our values or something, the first thing that we sell is savings. And that is, of course, because, money is something that is universal. Everybody understands money. But how do you see cost reduction or savings?
Actually, I think procurement should get the hell away from cost-saving programs.
Right.
I mean, renegotiation is something else than a cost saving.
Hmm.
If organizations want to spend less on things, you can always go look at the contract and see what's in there that we actually don't use anymore, but we still pay, etc. Those are
Right.
elements that you can take out. But most of it, it's about having a generic discount or whatever, and that's not going to work.
Right.
So the one thing that procurement would say is, okay, you want cost reduction? Fine. We want a business executive to be the owner of the project and the head of the steering committee, and will report to that business owner. No business owner, no cost reduction program.
Right.
Because the business owner needs to make the decision, are we going to accept service deterioration or not, etc. Then on the savings part, when you look at when you sign a contract, there's three big chunks that you always get. There's that was being delivered. There's that what is needed,
Hmm.
which might not be the same. And there's that what I need.
Right.
So those are three different elements. You have a contract for, but you don't need,
Yeah.
so terminate it. You will find contracts that actually don't deliver. Default, there's something to get. There's actually things the business need that are not in a contract that are not being delivered. So actually you need to act on it. And then the last part is, of course, that sometimes you get things that you haven't asked for that you get delivered, and over time something happens. A classical advantage example is the software providers that give you a feature for free and after a year say it's no longer for free.
Right.
If you understand the obligations in a contract, how it's running, you can actually find in the areas where you get stuff that's not needed, or you have contracts for stuff you don't use anymore, underused licenses, etc. That's also for me cost reduction.
Right.
It has nothing to do with it will drive your cash out lower, but you won't need to renegotiate. So
Right.
there's usually a lot of money that can be found by actually doing real obligations management in the contract. And organizations that are bad at that usually have contracts for services. For instance, I once met a client that had 200 subscriptions for a newspaper, and the 200 people that were on that list, 160 didn't work for the organization anymore, but they did pay 200 subscriptions.
Right.
Well, that's an easy saving.
Yeah.
For me, a large part of savings comes from being disciplined. And if you're not disciplined, this is an easy area to win something.
Right.
But actually, it's really stupid because that means that somebody didn't do his or her job. Starts as a company says, I really need to save money. Then it's not going to be found in what you buy. It's about how you deliver. I had a client once that wanted to do significant cost reduction in their distribution center. The smartest thing to do was actually not wait with ordering and then go to a supplier and then say, hey, we need this spare part, get a huge pallet, and you need to unpack the pallet. It's actually much cheaper to go out and order per order, so you don't have to unpack and repack it to get it in the right way in your warehouse.
Right.
Sounds small, but it saved the clients thousands of euros in resource capability in the distribution center. For me, good supply chain people and good procurement people understand the nature of the business and then understand where the actual cost and the hidden costs are, and then execute based under the leadership of somebody in the business that approves either process changes or service deterioration, and
Right.
not somebody in finance that says we want to do it with less. You don't need to be in the chair. You need to make sure that the leaders that are in the chair are so successful
Yeah.
that they love you, they understand the value you bring. And
Right.
next time when something happens, the first thing they do is they pick up the phone and say, Super Tim, I want you.
And that also says that, we should start talking about values rather than savings. Continuing the discussion, what are the future trends that you're seeing for contracts management? of course, AI would be one big thing. But what else, or regarding AI, what are the near future trends that you are seeing in contract management?
Well, of course, it's more use of agentic AI.
Hmm.
What I tend to see is more and more microbots in place that are doing just one very specific small task, which
Right,
might not be part of a CLM system, could also be something completely running around. For instance, if you take Salesforce,
right.
it's very logical that Salesforce analyzes all the mails and contacts with potential clients and clients. So what we tend to see is that there will be more and more and more stuff where actually AI is going to look into the entire organization if they can find indications on the performance. Client AIs that listen in on service desk calls to actually see what's happening.
Hmm.
So it's no longer the supplier saying my agents have serviced this and this is what we see. No, we also see things like mood analytics. What do people think? What is really happening? I see stuff like the experience picking up. So it's no longer just about price, but it's also about experience, which is hard to measure and will probably not end up in hard SLAs or KPIs, but it will be a talking point. I also see that in a technology space, we are as a company tracking some 900 different CLM providers. And although the market is huge, there's going to be a shakedown.
Hmm.
And if you look at the latest Gartner Magic Quadrant, I'll leave it up to everybody to take their own conclusions from this. You can already see the start of the shakedown happening
Right.
with how things are moving. You also will see that it's a question of time before some of the larger non-CLM providers will do the same thing in this space as they did in the RPA space. Just buy one or two companies
Right.
and integrate it into their suite. So I wouldn't be surprised if a Microsoft or an Amazon or a Google buys one of the CLM
Right.
providers, and they won't buy the top five, but they will buy a very aggressive number 7 to 10. Microsoft in the RPA space bought the number 10 on the list and integrated into their software and made it for free, effectively killing the RPA market and making it their own.
Right.
That will happen in this space as well. And then the last thing what's going to happen is that contract management, especially, but that's in the development we see a lot, is entering the M&A space.
Right.
What you see is that once you need to sell an organization, one of the biggest hassle in the due diligence is actually the contract management portfolio.
Right.
Usually the sales contracts are in place and the people contracts are in place and the renting of the building can be found somewhere. But actually all the purchased requirements and how it acts as a value chain and where the dependencies are in the supply. So I talk a lot with a few of these larger portfolio companies. That's where they really struggle. So if you want to shorten your due diligence, you need to have an ERP that tells you how the business is doing. You need to have a CRM, how your
Right.
clients are doing, and you need to have a CLM, how your supply is doing. And this is again supply, operations, sales. So when I see venture capitalists starting to think like that in due diligence processes,
Right.
that means there's a lot of room for procurement and contract management professionals, especially in that area in organizations that have the desire because they're VC owned to do a transaction somewhere in the next 24 months. And that is where you start to see real traction on CLM. So I see a lot of CLM implementations currently happening in portfolio companies of VCs.
Right.
They're not buying it for the technology.
Hmm.
They're buying it to become more attractive and easier to implement when somebody decides to acquire that company. And that's a whole new ball game for contract management and procurement. This is one of the chats a good CPO should be having with CEO.
Right.
Do we need to prepare to become um, sales ready? And
Hmm.
that's not selling something, but to be sold yourself.
Right.
They are starting to see, as I said in the beginning, you need to be in control of your supply, you need to be in control of your ops, and you need to be in control of your sales.
Right.
CLM, ERP, CRM. And that might also be the next technology step, that these processes are going to be integrated into one. And probably the only ones that can do that are the SAPs, etc., of this world. Now, the question is, are they going to be standalone solutions, or are clients going to buy that as one enterprise suite? I have no idea.
That is a good thought again. CLM, ERP, and then CRMs. That integration is on the card. That is a possibility as well, yes. I hope future is good. Future is better
Yeah,
than
I
what
think
it is right now. Uh,
yeah, I think that the current geopolitical climate is for procurement professionals and contract management professionals actually a pretty nice place to be.
because whenever there is a crisis, I think the first one to get called is procurement. Then I think with the future trend, I think this is where I am done with my questions. Is there
So
anything that you would like to add or something?
I'm really happy to have been here. And I think it's very good that people like you have a non-commercial approach to spreading knowledge.
Right.
Because as you said in the beginning, it's not about any of us trying to sell something. It's about sharing knowledge. And I believe that's very important. So keep up the good work, and all in the audience, I want to thank you for listening in to us, because I think this was a very lively and cool conversation. So let's see how you all think about it. So feel free to reach out to either of us on LinkedIn, and let's see how we bring it to the next level.
I'll put Right. your contact details in the comment sections and all that. Um,
Super.
and as you said, a lot of good topics. I think contract management, savings, cost reduction, procurement as a subject, future trends and all that. Again, the point of this podcast is not to, cover everything in one go, but to get people interested in the topic more. And once they get interested, they go out on the net, do their research, contact you, read material.
Yeah, let's be honest, this kind of stuff is fun.
Right.
It's always fun. I mean, sharing knowledge is fun. I mean, as I
Yeah.
earlier said, hoarding knowledge is destroyed knowledge.
Right.
So better make it fun. And I really like the what you're doing.
Arjun, very nice session, a lot of learning. I hope a lot of people see this and learn and get interested in contracts. It is a very important thing that we do. It was very nice talking to you. Bye bye, all. Thank you for listening and have a nice day then.
If you like this video, please like and subscribe to the channel.